In the previous chapter, we learned how Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidur got married and how Pandu became the earth's emperor. Now, further, the great sage Vyas once arrived in Hastinapur's royal palace, hungry, thirsty, and exhausted. Queen Gandhari met sage Vyasa after learning of his arrival. She gave the sage plenty of water and delectable food. To help him feel less exhausted, she also gave his feet a massage. This eased all of his travel related weariness. He then directed Gandhari to seek a boon. She prayed for 100 sons who would be as powerful as her husband Dhritarashtra. Vyas bestowed upon her this boon. Gandhari conceived, but she faced a dilemma. She had been pregnant for 2 years but hadn't given birth yet. She was quite upset by this and wondered what was still living in her womb after 2 years. Gandhari was informed that Kunti had given birth to a son in the meantime. She was quite disappointed to hear this. The fact that Kunti's son would be the eldest and the next monarch of Hastinapur angered Gandhari. Gandhari was hoping that her sons would ascend to the throne if her husband did not, but that opportunity slipped away from their hands. Gandhari faints at the thought of this and decides to abort this child, which she does. Her womb gave birth to a massive iron-hard lump of flesh. She then instructed the royal officials to dispose of the lump. Sage Vyas appeared there right away after learning of this, and Gandhari explained everything. Gandhari addressed Vyas saying, "O revered sage, what remains hidden from you since you are all-knowing? I was informed that Kunti had just given birth to her eldest son in the middle of the forest. I was devastated to hear this. I am saddened by the idea that my husband was previously denied the kingdom due to his blindness. I believed that by bearing his eldest son, I would grant my husband's wish and make my son the next king of Hastinapur. However, time let us down once more. Hence, I struck my womb, causing the pregnancy to terminate since I was so overcome with grief and fury. The rest of it is in front of you." Vyas consoled Gandhari saying, "Gandhari, my daughter, my boon can never be in vain. This lump of flesh is my blessing. Make rapid arrangements for 101 pots and fill them to the brim with ghee. If you sprinkle water on this lump of flesh, it will naturally split into 101 pieces. Then, place those thumb-sized bits of flesh in various pots and open them after 2 years. You will certainly be blessed with a son." Gandhari followed the sage's instructions and everything he had predicted came to reality. Duryodhana was born after she opened the first pot 2 years later. The powerful Bhimsen was born to Kunti on the same day as Duryodhana. Duryodhana's birth was highly unlucky for Hastinapur and all ill omens began to appear everywhere. Duryodhana started crying like a donkey as soon as he was born. Donkeys, jackals, and crows all let forth loud howls upon hearing his cries. Fire started to appear everywhere as a strong storm started to blow. When Dhritarashtra heard this message from nature, he was terrified and turned to the wise men and Brahmins for guidance. After deciphering these scriptural omens, the Brahmins and Vidur addressed Dhritarashtra saying, "O king, the birth of your eldest son is very undesirable according to what nature is attempting to tell us. This child shall be the cause of the downfall of this dynasty. It will be similar to raising a snake which is ready to strike. Therefore, you should abandon this son of yours. Even after abandoning him, you still would be left with 100 children. Give this son up, as it is the welfare of this family." Vidur went on, "Your Majesty, remember that the scriptures say that one must sacrifice a human being to defend a family to defend a village to defend a nation, and the whole world to save oneself. Thus, you ought to leave this boy behind." However, Dhritarashtra did not abandon Duryodhana. We now need to stop and think about whether Dhritarashtra is solely to blame for the Mahabharata war. There would have been no war, no palace of wax, and no disrobing of Draupadi if he had abandoned Duryodhana. What would have happened even if Dhritarashtra had given up one son? He still had 99 sons. He disregarded Vidur's counsel, who clarified the teachings of Dharma in this regard. Dhritarashtra cannot be held accountable at this point of time because he had a unique experience as a first time father. How is it possible for a parent to desert his own little son? How is it feasible for someone to comprehend how hard it is to let go of a small child who is really your own? Dhritarashtra was even more eager than Gandhari to hear of his son's arrival, and how could he so ruthlessly desert that same son? Dhritarashtra and Vidur were both correct in their respective positions. However, it was inappropriate for Vidur to discuss this subject at that point of time. These things may have been stated at some other point after the birth, which was done, and when Dhritarashtra disagreed then we can call it just pure attachment to his son. But at this point of the story, he was merely acting as a parent. Gandhari had 100 sons and one daughter as a result of repeatedly opening the pots and having babies emerge from them. Meanwhile, a Vaishya caste woman who worked for Dhritarashtra during Gandhari's pregnancy gave birth to Yuyutsu, the son of Dhritarashtra and the maid, in the same year. Yuyutsu was a man of great virtue. Now we come to the list of 101 Kauravas, which are respectively Duryodhana, Dushasan, Dussasaha, Dushasal, Jalasandh, Sama, Saha, Vinda, Anuvinda, Durdarsha, Subahu, Dushpradarshan, Durmarshan, Durmukh, Dushkarna, Karna, Viveshanti, Vikarna, Shala, Sattva, Sulochan, Chitra, Upchitra, Chitraksh, Charuchitra, Sharasan, Durmad, Durvigaha, Vivitsu, Viktanan, Urnab, Sunab, Nand, Upnand, Chitraban, Chitravarma, Suvarma, Durvimochan, Ayobahu, Mahabahu, Chitrang, Chitrakundal, Bhimveg, Bhimbal, Balaki, Balvardhan, Ugrayudh, Sushen, Kundhar, Mahodar, Chitrayudh, Nishangi, Pashi, Vrindarak, Durgavarma, Durgashatra, Somakirti, Anudar, Durshatsandh, Jarasandh, Satyasandh, Sadhasuvak, Ugrashava, Ugrasen, Senani, Dushparajay, Aparajit, Kundashai, Vishalaksh, Duradhar, Durhast, Suhast, Batveg, Suvarcha, Adityaketu, Bahavashi, Nagdat, Agrai, Kavachi, Krathan, Kundi, Ugra, Bhimrat, Veerbahu, Alulop, Abhay, Raudrakarma, Dridharath Shray, Anadrishya, Kundabhedi, Viravi, Pramat, Pramathi, Dirgharoma, Dirghabahu, Mahabahu, Vyudhorask, Kanakthvaj, Kundashi, Virja, and Dushasala. King Pandu and his two wives were dwelling in the forest while the Kauravas were being born. Pandu loved to hunt. While hunting one day, he came upon a dense forest packed with untamed beasts. The monarch witnessed a young deer mating with its doe there. When Emperor Pandu saw them, he used 5 sharp golden arrows to pierce the two deer. The deer began to lament loudly, and as he did so, he addressed Pandu in human language, saying, "O king, even men plagued by lust, rage, and greed, and entangled in several sins, do not conduct such a heinous act. You were born into a family of honorable warriors. O king, how did you desert Dharma?" In response, Pandu said, "Killing a deer requires the same mindset as killing enemies. You should therefore refrain from criticizing me. We hunt and we kill animals because we are Kshatriyas. What is so wrong about that?" The deer replied, "A man attacks his enemy when he is in a battle, not when the enemy is in a crisis." Then Pandu exclaimed, "Oh dear, Kshatriyas hunt without considering the animal's level of alertness or carelessness. They just attack it when they see an opportunity. The deer responded, Sire, I am not concerned about the reason you took my life. I see your perspective, but given my condition, your action was unsuitable. You ought to have waited until I completed mating. Sex is the fundamental basis of this universe. Which rational individual would halt such an action? O monarch, as per Dharma, having children is necessary to settle the obligation to your forefathers. And that is exactly what I was doing alongside my wife. However, by releasing your arrow in that manner, you have hindered that attempt. Your Royal Highness, you came into the illustrious Kuru dynasty. Such deeds are unworthy of you. Your actions are extremely reprehensible and led to a tarnished reputation. Being a Kshatriya, you ought to refrain from such sinful actions. Yet you are participating in them. The deer, having just a few breaths remaining, uttered in his final moment, O king, I am a hermit called Kindam. I felt embarrassed to perform such a deed in public while in human form. Hence my wife and I assumed the form of a deer. I frequently wander in this disguise. Taking my life will not result in the sin of killing a Brahmin, since you were unaware that I am a sage. However, the situation in which you ended my life was entirely inappropriate. I curse you, and may God grant that you die while having sex with your wife just as I did. And may your wife who will take part in this deed also turn into a sati just as your arrows are about to turn my wife into one. Sage Kindam and his wife left their bodies with this curse. Pandu was devastated to see the deceased husband and wife. He thought to himself, overcome with regret, Oh God, what have I done? I have committed a sin because of my delusions. People call me wise. What has happened to my conscience today? How could I do such a terrible and despicable act? I shall now renounce the bonds of this illusory world and move towards attaining salvation. I am going to live my life just like my father sage Vyas. Pandu approaches Kunti and Madri with the intention of renouncing the world, telling them, O Kunti, Madri, both of you go to Hastinapur and inform everyone that Pandu has renounced this world. Kunti and Madri exclaimed to him, O son of Arya, we can perform penance with you at another ashram in addition to renunciation. We want you to accompany us to Swargalok. In fact, we want you to be a soulmate even there. We dedicate all our senses to you. We shall undoubtedly perish if you desert us, O greatest of the Kurus. Hence, Pandu, Kunti and Madri resolved to live in the Vanaprastha ashram. Pandu, Kunti and Madri put on the dress of hermits instead of their royal robes and jewelry. They asked the Brahmins dwelling in the forest to let Hastinapur know that they had embraced the Vanaprastha ashram, and then they gave them their clothing and jewelry. When the Brahmins informed the royal court of Hastinapur of this, the atmosphere was one of despair. Meanwhile, Pandu along with his wives left the forests and reached the Gandhamadan mountain, where fate had other plans for him. But that story is for the next chapter. Like, share and subscribe if you like our videos. Please also comment on the video and express your thoughts and questions.